Chapter 1266, Nighttime Exploration of the Great Snow Mountain. Liang Yu and Mu Yan exchanged glances. There was indeed a problem here. The shadow fell like quicksilver, flowing down the gap between the wall and the carpet, and soon it slipped through a not-so-well-concealed cellar door. Unexpectedly, the space below was even larger than the one above, and it was even more lively. An indescribable smell came from it, as if it were the lustful smell of the reproductive organs of a black goat in heat, mixed with the sweetish smell of milk. This made Liang Yu and Mu Yan quickly turn on the air filtration function of their combat uniforms. The lights were dim, and there were actually one cage after another down there. Inside some of the cages, women were wearing thin clothes or were simply naked, flaunting their figures. Some were huddled in the corner, their eyes vacant, as if they were walking dead. However, among these women, those with better looks could have their own rooms, while most of the women lived in chaos together, with no toilets next to them, only simple wooden buckets. Liang Yu and Mu Yan's faces looked extremely ugly. As women, they naturally knew what these imprisoned women were used for. However, this did not make them break their guard. It was not until they saw the several rooms inside, where there were pregnant women wearing ragged clothes, with messy hair, and big bellies. Pregnant women? How could this be? Mu Yan lowered her head, as if she did not quite understand this sight. The Paji family kept these women as nothing more than playthings. But once they became pregnant, they became extremely troublesome. However, in this underground prison, about 1/3 of the women are pregnant. Liang Yu's eyes stared at the pregnant women, and many images flashed through her mind. In an instant, her face turned pale, and she bent over and began to retch violently. I know what kind of people they are. Tears welled up in the corners of her eyes, and her eyes became red, a sign of extreme anger. This place is hell on earth. She gritted her teeth and cursed in a rage, word for word. At that moment, she was filled with the urge to rescue these poor women and not let them continue to be treated like human livestock. Fortunately, she had matured and, after clenching her fists for a long time, she still did not take action. After Zhang Yi's business is over, I will definitely destroy this place. Liang Yu said coldly, word for word. Mu Yan whispered, don't worry, as long as his deal with Pa Jigsaw is over, this place will be meaningless to him. You can do whatever you want, as long as you're happy. It's just a temporary solution. She said this while shaking her head indifferently. She had spent more difficult years than Liang Yu in the outside world, so she knew the cruelty of this world. Liang Yu spoke, and Pa Jigsaw immediately released the more than 100 women imprisoned in the dungeon in order to please Zhang Yi. But they could not remain on the snowy plateau forever. The old ones would go, and the new ones would come. Besides, there were more than just the snowy plateau in this world. Everywhere where the sun did not shine, there were demons. Liang Yu remained silent, and Mu Yan glanced at the numb women before turning her head and manipulating the shadows to leave the courtyard. Just as they were about to leave and check out other places, suddenly in the distance, under the infinite darkness of the night, a dazzling ball of fire rose. Shouts of death resounded, rising up to the heavens. A large number of Paji's private soldiers charged towards the direction of the fire with weapons in hand, and some mutants capable of flight swept past in the air. Damn rebels, they're here again. Capture them all and hang them from the gallows to freeze to death. From the conversation of the private soldiers, Liang Yu and Mu Yan learned that the people who had come were the rebels from the southwest region. At one time or another, they had learned about this complex force from Pa Jigsaw. In Pa Jigsaw's words, the rebels were the root cause of all the unrest in the southwest region, the demons who destroyed the rule of the Tusi, and the sinful people who had willingly fallen. However, after witnessing the true situation on the snowy plateau, Liang Yu and Mu Yan's views were shaken. Let's go and have a look. Liang Yu said. Mu Yan reminded her, it's fine to have a look, just don't get involved. Liang Yu raised the corners of her mouth, don't worry, I know what I'm doing. On the other side, Zhang Yi traveled to the Great Snow Mountain. After using Space Shuffle for a while, he arrived near the Sangha Temple, the holiest temple on the snowy plateau. The temple was built on top of a hill, huge and majestic, and even from a distance it gave a sense of the profound history that moved the soul. Zhang Yi suppressed the urge to enter the Sangha temple. After all, the Undertaker of the Snowy Plateau lived here. Without figuring out the other party's strength, Zhang Yi would not approach lightly. So as soon as Zhang Yi turned his head, he looked at the Great Snow Mountain, which was more than 10 kilometers behind the Sangha temple. The Great Snow Mountain, with an altitude of over 7,000 meters, is one of the few peaks in the entire Huashu Kingdom. Even though it stands in the Snowy Plateau, it still looks huge and stands out among the entire Qinling Mountains. Zhang Yi rubbed his wrists. At this time, he was fully prepared, and his goal was not to enter the so-called Demon Kingdom, but just to gather intelligence. Therefore, there would be no risk. Zhang Yi arrived at the Great Snow Mountain. From here to Sangha Temple, it was strictly guarded by heavily armed monk soldiers. You could tell from their attire that they were not in the same league as ordinary private soldiers. They were all wearing expensive combat uniforms. The southwest region could not produce these things with its own technological level, so they were most likely bought from the Jiangnan region or the northwest region. Among the 6 regions, the Jiangnan region had the most complete technological tree points and the most advanced combat uniform manufacturing. But none of this mattered to Zhang Yi. He instantly passed through the heavy blockade and entered the Great Snow Mountain directly. Suddenly, everything went dark. Well, he got stuck in the mud. There was nothing he could do about it, and he didn't have X-ray vision either. The power of the void appeared on the surface of Zhang Yi's body, instantly forming a huge hole around him. The intelligence system helped him confirm his current location, and then Zhang Yi continued to travel directly downward. Great Snow Mountain is very large, and without a map, Zhang Yi can only slowly search in this way. But since there is supposedly an underground demon kingdom, there must be a very large cavity, and all he has to do is go down. Sure enough, not long after, he shuttled again, and finally found himself in a dark cavity. There was no light, so Zhang Yi opened the tactical scope. Soon, the world in front of him appeared to be glowing. Although it was still dim, he could see the contours in front of him clearly. It seemed to be a huge cave that extended from the northeast to the southwest. The underground was cold and damp, and it should be connected to an underground dark river. Zhang Yi turned on the sonic system again and began to explore the terrain of the underground cave through sound waves. Chapter 1267, Entrance to the Demon Kingdom. Zhang Yi arrived in the space beneath the Great Snow Mountain and discovered a huge underground cave. Without a map, he could only explore the area slowly. It was indeed as Pa Jigsaw had said, even the combined forces of the 4 great families would need to expend huge amounts of manpower and resources to explore this place. No wonder the 4 great families had decided to join forces and enter the area together after the Dharma assembly. However, for Zhang Yi, not having a map was only a minor problem. He had plenty of time and the ability to get around. Using the intelligence system device on his body, Zhang Yi slowly figured out the general situation of the cave. It was connected to an underground river that extended hundreds of kilometers from southeast to northwest. And this was only the area detected by the device. In fact, if you count the flowing underground river, it is feared that it will extend from the entire Qinling Mountains to Sichuan and Chongqing. Zhang Yi narrowed the scope to within a radius of 100 miles. After all, the location of the legendary Demon Kingdom was said to be under the Great Snow Mountain, so it couldn't have been too far off. Over the past 2,000 years, there had been no significant changes to the landscape. Swish! After Zhang Yi had grasped the general topography of the area, he began to use his space shuffle ability to explore the underground at high speed. After a few minutes, he had searched almost the entire underground cave system of the Great Snow Mountain. However, as a result, he only found some bones of sacrificial cattle and goats piled up into small hills underground, but did not find any traces of underground ruins. Nothing? Could it be that it's still somewhere else? Zhang Yi frowned, his heart filled with doubt. However, at this moment, his keen intuition for space made him sense that something else had appeared nearby. Zhang Yi did not hesitate to shuffle into the rock formation in front of him. Everything under heaven's space protected his entire body, and no one could sense his presence. However, Zhang Yi was able to observe everything as usual. Soon after, Zhang Yi saw a humanoid creature appear from the other direction of the cave. It was a person wearing black combat fatigues, stepping on the damp rocks in the cave and walking step by step towards the direction where Zhang Yi was. Zhang Yi narrowed his eyes and took out the white eagle in his right hand and aimed it at the person in front of him. However, the person walked straight past Zhang Yi's location and headed deeper into the cave. Zhang Yi's eyes sank slightly. It seems that I'm not the only one who thinks this way. The four families had agreed that after the Dharma assembly, they would gather the map fragments in their possession and head to the doors of the Demon Kingdom. But obviously not everyone was as committed to their promises, and they all wanted to get their hands on the treasures of the Demon Kingdom early. Zhang Yi didn't have a clue either, so he simply followed behind the other person. With everything under heaven protecting him and the optical camouflage of the submarine dragon armor, unless they were looking for him on purpose, even someone with a keen intuition wouldn't be able to sense that someone was following them. The man seemed to be familiar with the underground paths, walking forward without any pause. Soon after, he stopped at an underground cliff. Zhang Yi floated in the darkness, coldly watching everything in front of him. He had passed by this cliff before, but the bottom was filled with bones of cows, goats, and humans used in sacrifices. The man, wrapped in black combat fatigues, cautiously looked left and right before leaping from midair. At this moment, two huge golden wings suddenly extended from his back. The golden light illuminated the surrounding underground space for hundreds of meters. The golden wings were as beautiful as works of art, made of pure gold, and each feather shimmered with a bright radiance. He flapped his wings and soared into the air, streaking towards the bottom at great speed. Zhang Yi followed silently behind him. When the man in black landed, Zhang Yi realized that there was another world below. The cliff looked like just a long crack from above, but the space below was extremely vast. After the man in black landed, he folded his hands and muttered something. Zhang Yi learned through the translation of the intelligence system that this was an ancient Sanskrit mantra. As the man in black recited the mantra, a ray of golden light slowly emanated from him. At the bottom of the cliff, a large number of bones began to tremble violently. The bones of the offerings that had been piled up like a mountain surged up like sifted grain. In front of the black-clad man, like a surging tide, a small mountain made of bones began to emerge. Clattering. The bones fell one after the other, and the skull bones rolled everywhere. The small mountain of bones and bones began to collapse with a boom. Right in front of the black-clad man, a huge deep well was revealed. Zhang Yi watched this secretly, his eyes fixed on the huge deep well. Could this be the entrance to the Demon Kingdom? Zhang Yi looked at the black-clad man, his eyes filled with thought. The black-clad man did not hesitate, and decisively jumped into the deep well. Zhang Yi hesitated for a moment, locked onto the front with the ability of everything follows the trail, and followed closely behind. The advantage of having a spatial ability is that you can predict crises in advance. And a space ability allows you to quickly escape from any dangerous situation. Since he was already here, and had seen such a mysterious figure and scene, Zhang Yi naturally wouldn't miss the chance to follow. It was almost certain that this person must be here for the so-called Demon Kingdom treasure. After passing through the long, dark well, Zhang Yi soon followed the man in black to an underground world. Compared to the above-ground cave, the space here was significantly smaller, as if it were a secluded valley. It was surrounded by uplifted rocks, creating a small space of only a few thousand square meters. But the first time Zhang Yi arrived here, he saw what he wanted to see. Doors. A real door, completely dark, with a color that was hard to discern as metal or stone, glowing with a menacing blackish green. The huge doors are embedded in the rock face of the underworld, more than 50 meters high and about 20 meters wide. The doors are decorated with ancient Sanskrit script, seemingly some kind of seal, and above the doors is carved a tragic scene of war. The picture is easy to understand. It is the story of a hero leading countless soldiers, defeating the ferocious demons and driving them into the dark caves. If my guess is correct, this should be the story of how the hero King Geezer defeated the Demon Kingdom and suppressed it underground in the Great Snow Mountain. Is this the door to the Demon Kingdom? Zhang Yi never imagined that the so-called door to the Demon Kingdom actually existed. He had thought it was just a symbol. After all, if there is a door, then you can go in and out. When King Geezer suppressed the Demon Kingdom back then, he could not possibly have allowed them to reappear on the snowy plateau, and he should have completely sealed off their entrances and exits. But why was this door left behind? Perhaps King Geezer himself knew that the power of the underworld could never be completely suppressed. Or was it a treasure left for future generations? Chapter 1268, The Five Epsilons. Zhang Yi's mind was filled with all kinds of suspicions as he looked at the huge doors in front of him. Without making a move, he turned his gaze to the man in black. The man in black looked at the gates of the Demon Kingdom in front of him, walked up to them step by step, and reached out to touch them, but his movements were obviously a little timid. After hesitating for a long time, he finally mustered the courage to reach out and put his hand on them. Zhang Yi could feel that he had obviously begun to exert his strength, but the huge doors did not budge at all. The power was so great that even the surrounding earth veins began to shake violently. This person is a powerful mutant of level Epsilon. The first person Zhang Yi thought of when he encountered an existence of this level on the snowy plateau was the Undertaker from Sangha Temple. It must be him. With Epsilon-level strength, and the ability to find the entrance to the Demon Kingdom's gate, it can only be him. Unexpectedly, the Undertaker had quietly arrived here alone before the Dharma assembly. The situation in the snowy plateau was really more complicated than expected. Golden power began to surge from the Undertaker's body. He girded his loins and tried to push open the ancient doors with his own hands. However, no matter how strong he was, the doors were not affected in the slightest, not even the slightest crack appeared. Zhang Yi pondered for a long time before opening a dimensional gate in front of him. Since brute force would not work, he tried using his space ability. He wanted to see if he could steal the chicken, something that could make the Undertakers of the snowy plateau excited. However, the result of the attempt surprised Zhang Yi. The power of space, which had always been invincible when he used it in the past, was unable to pass through the ancient doors no matter how he tried. It was as if some force had negated his supernatural powers when they got close. Zhang Yi refused to believe in evil and opened several more dimensional gates, trying to pass through the doors, but all ended in failure. This was the first time in Zhang Yi's life that he had been unable to pass through terrain, and it caused a huge sense of awe in his heart. This feeling of powerlessness was something he had experienced not long ago. It was when he faced the White Dragon Child beneath the Qinling Mountains. His proud space shuffle ability was broken by the White Dragon Child with a single wave of his hand. This place is truly extraordinary and full of weirdness. Zhang Yi even had the thought of retreat in his mind. Just one door was so difficult to deal with, who knew what powerful existence was below? What if he encounters a being of the same level as the Hades Gatekeeper or White Dragon, and tries to kill it again? Wouldn't he be courting death? Zhang Yi has never been one to take risks. But Zhang Yi didn't leave immediately. He wanted to see what the Undertaker would do. And now he couldn't leave anyway. Because from the other end of the underground valley, another person walked out. When he saw this person, Zhang Yi's pupils couldn't help but shrink. The man approaching was wearing only coarse clothing, his hair loose, his feet bare, his hands together in prayer, walking slowly step by step. "Sir, you shouldn't come to such a dangerous place." Zhang Yi's face was full of strange expressions when he saw him. Because the person in front of him was the same person he had seen at the entrance to the snowy plateau. 2 epsilons. Zhang Yi had thought that there was only 1 epsilon on the snowy plateau, but now, which of these 2 was the Undertaker of Sangha Temple? One was dressed entirely in black and his face was hidden, while the other was dressed in rough cloth and had a frank gaze. Zhang Yi could almost be certain that the person he had seen during the day was the Undertaker of Sangha Temple. Then who was the man in black? The man in black became alert when he saw the man with the disheveled hair. "Why are you here?" The man with the disheveled hair smiled slightly and said, "If you can come, why can't I?" He sighed and said with a face of compassion, "Give up. You have brought too much disaster to the snowy plateau. It's not too late to give up now, and I will beg the Buddha to intercede for you." The man in black sneered. "Hypocrite! Aren't you the source of the disaster in the snowy region?" His supernatural powers surged out like a tidal wave, and the two huge golden wings on his back soared up like sharp blades towards the sky. Zhang Yi heard a mind-shaking cry. Although the man in black had displayed his formidable power, the man radiating energy remained calm. He did not look at the man in black, but turned his head and suddenly looked in the direction of Zhang Yi. "Everyone, have you had enough of the show?" Zhang Yi narrowed his eyes. At this moment, he used dimensional space to isolate all his breaths, so that even the most advanced electronic equipment could not detect his presence. Moreover, he was hiding in the rock formation, so theoretically, no one could find him. Is this guy trying to bluff him? The man with the aura waited for a moment and shook his head. Hiding in plain sight, given your identities, is probably not a loss of face, is it? At this point, another figure emerged from the shadows in the other direction. That person was also cloaked in a black combat suit, making it impossible to see their face, but they were tall. "Ha, I've heard for a long time that the Tantra Undertaker's 6 senses are powerful, allowing them to hear all things, and no hiding skills can escape them. Today I see for myself, truly formidable." From another direction, another man emerged, clad in a dark golden battle suit, holding a golden sacred sword upside down in his hand. He said with a smile, "We just came to watch the fun. I didn't realize that there was such an amazing thing existing under the Great Snow Mountain." The tall black-clad man snorted and looked at the golden-clad man. "What's here, you already know, don't you? Why pretend to be stupid now?" The man in black let out a long sigh. He looked again in the direction where Zhang Yi was. "Patron, don't hide anymore. Since everyone is here, why don't you come out and say something?" It was only at this point that Zhang Yi knew that he could no longer hide. He changed the appearance of the submarine dragon armor. In order to facilitate stealth, the submarine dragon armor could change colors and make slight adjustments to its appearance. At this time, Zhang Yi's armor was silver gray. He walked out from among the rock formations and stood in the center of the field, maintaining a sufficient distance from the other 4 people. "Hello everyone, is everyone here?" Zhang Yi said with a smile. In reality, however, everyone present at this time was extremely shaken inside. Mighty people have a sense of each other's presence, and each of these people present had extraordinary strength. In other words, here, there were 5 top-level mutants of the Epsilon level at the same time. None of the 5 had expected this outcome. They had thought they were here to deal a blow to the next level, but the result, everyone had thought the same thing. Chapter 1269, Battle of the Top Level. The 5 stood in front of the Demon Kingdom's gates, speechless. It was the tall black-clad man who spoke first. "It seems that you are all here for this object." He glanced at the huge entrance doors to the Demon Kingdom. The mutant with golden wings glared in anger and snorted, "This is a treasure belonging to the snowy plateau. Who are you to lay your hands on it?" The distributor folded his hands and looked around at the people present. "Everyone, I don't know where you got your information from, but this place is not for you without the protection of the gods and Buddhas." His tone was gentle, but there was an unyielding force to it. A hearty laugh came from the tall mutant's mouth. "Ha ha! You don't count for this matter. According to you, the treasure should go to the one who is capable. Since when has Tantra been qualified to take the ancient people's treasure for themselves?" The man in gold held his long sword upside down and gave a light smile. He didn't say anything, but he also made his attitude clear. Zhang Yi remained silent, but he didn't show the slightest intention of backing down. The current situation made him feel a hint of pressure. 5 Epsilon-level strong individuals appeared at the same time in the southwest region. Such a force, combined, was enough to flatten any medium-sized country in the world. But who were they? Zhang Yi pondered in his heart, comparing these people with the epsilons he knew. Unfortunately, they had all used the intelligent system's voice-changing device, and it was impossible to distinguish their accents. The man with the flowing hair frowned, and finally a trace of anger appeared in his eyes. "Are you really not leaving?" The tall mutant shrugged and sneered, "Why should we leave? The remains of these ancient people do not belong to your tundra." The golden-winged mutant angrily shouted, "Nonsense! These are the remains of the demon kingdom suppressed by our ancestor King Geezer. These doors are proof that they belong to our snowy plateau." When faced with outsiders, the golden-winged mutant, who had been bristling with anger, and the radiant man did not hesitate to stand on the same side. He pointed his finger at the huge doors, which exuded a sense of ancient solidity and a strong oppressive sense of death. "I wonder how much human blood King Geezer used to pour into the doors using Tuntra's secret methods when they were first built." Zhang Yi had personally witnessed the process of Tuntra creating magical weapons. The level of bloodshed was so great that it made people gasp in horror. The man in gold finally spoke at this time. He pointed at the doors. "You can take the doors. However, the things behind the doors must be left behind." It was clear that the situation was irreconcilable. The man who had been emitting energy folded his hands in prayer and chanted Buddhist mantras. Suddenly, a surging power exploded from his body. At the same time, from the Sangha temple in the distance, the 3,000 prayer wheels began to spin rapidly, and wisps of invisible mystical power rose up into the sky and entered the Great Snow Mountain. This power was invisible to others, but Zhang Yi and the others could see it clearly. This left Zhang Yi speechless. He thought of the legendary power of incense and prayer, but that was just something from myths and legends, and no one had ever taken it seriously. But the power the person radiating it was clearly receiving was a blessing from Sangha Temple. No, to be precise, it was the blessing of faith from the followers of the Tantric faith on the entire snowy plateau. Could it be that there really are gods in this world? Zhang Yi's worldview was shaken. But no matter how mysterious something is, in the mysterious place that is the snowy plateau, it seems extremely normal. The power emanating from the person kept growing stronger. At this point, Zhang Yi was completely certain that he was the undertaker of the Tantric sect. If not, how could he have received the blessings of the entire Tantric sect? His aura was getting stronger and stronger, so strong that it was a bit of a challenge for Zhang Yi. At the very least, he has 20,000 points in his ability index. But at first, he gave me the impression that he had at most 15,000 points. Is this the power of the Tantric faith? Zhang Yi said to himself. Fortunately, nowadays, after absorbing the spirit of sacrifice and obtaining the submarine dragon armor, his strength has also been greatly enhanced, reaching an astonishing 18,000 points. Even if he faces a mutant with 2,000 points more in ability index than him, if he can't defeat him, he can still escape unharmed. Seeing that he could not convince the others to leave, the Undertaker chose to fight directly. He did have the capital to do so. On the snowy plateau, with the blessings of Tantra, he was able to exert the power of a black chariot level 20,000. When they saw that the Undertaker was going to fight, the expressions of the other people also became serious. Even the arrogant, tall mutant raised his hands. A huge one-handed shield appeared in his hands, along with a black knight's longsword. The tall mutant struck the shield with his longsword and laughed. "Come, let me see just how powerful the Undertaker of the Tantric faith really is." The Undertaker indeed chose to attack the tall mutant first. His body was wrapped in a thick, almost tangible, supernatural energy, as if he were a true god or Buddha. He launched into action, unleashing a terrifying palm strike that blasted towards the tall mutant. In an instant, the valley, which was only a few thousand square meters, was filled with golden light, as if a tsunami had hit the golden ocean. The tall mutant laughed aloud. Facing the Undertaker's surging power attack like an ocean, he used his left hand to hold up the one-handed shield. The golden torrent galloped furiously towards him, but was split the moment it encountered the shield. However, the violent impact still caused the tall mutant to take a slight step back. The Undertaker leaped towards him, his eyes full of compassion. He had the heart of a bodhisattva, but he acted with thunderous measures. The most terrifying thing was that his attack was not just on Gao Dairen, but also on Zhang Yi and Jin Jiaeren at the same time. A warm, jade-like palm extended out, and a huge Buddha's hand descended from the sky, about to envelop the three of them together. A sneer appeared at the corner of Zhang Yi's mouth. Even though he had the strength of a black chariot level, Undertaker was fighting three of them at once, which was a bit of an underestimation. Zhang Yi didn't know about the others, but the tall mutant's strength definitely wasn't below 16,000 points. However, at this time, Zhang Yi didn't want to reveal his identity yet. He took out a long sword made of Edelman metal. The black power of the void around him burst into flames with a sound, and he looked like the Dark Knight who had come out of hell. Zhang Yi slashed his sword at the golden wave in front of him. The golden armored mutant on the other side also raised his golden sacred sword and joined the fight. Under the combined attack of the three, the Undertaker's Buddha palm actually cracked with a crack sound. The Undertaker's face changed slightly. He didn't expect the strength of these three to be so strong. Not far away, the golden-winged mutant saw this and, after some hesitation, stood next to the Undertaker. Jin Qi pointed to the sky, his huge wings fully spread, and the wingspan reached more than 10 meters. With a pong sound, the golden wings all over the sky shot like sharp swords towards the tall mutant on the far left. Chapter 1270, Blood River. The situation on the scene was 3 against 2. The Undertaker and the other guy were both local mutants from the Snowy Plateau and knew each other. In their view, the treasures of the Demon Kingdom belonged to their Tantra, and of course they could not let outsiders get their hands on them. So, although they were not sure who these people were, the three of them were currently on the same side, and they chose to join forces to fight the Undertaker and the golden-winged mutant. The tall mutant felt the pressure of the Undertaker, and the golden-winged mutant shot out a storm of feather blades, rushing straight at him. The tall mutant suddenly let out a loud laugh. His body became even more majestic and upright, and the purple hellfire of the knight's longsword in his right hand suddenly burst forth, and a terrifying black devil's head slowly solidified behind him. The power of the 5 of them had converged into one, and the situation had become completely out of control. If the power of any one of them got out of control, the consequences would be unimaginable. If this power were to overflow at this moment, it would be comparable to a small reaper of love, and it could even destroy half of the huge Sarah city. However, everyone is already in a difficult situation. Whoever stops first will become the flood outlet and be completely submerged by the surging power. Zhang Yi's eyes were cold, and a huge black hole appeared behind him. The boundless power of emptiness surged out like a tide, transforming into flame-like energy around him and rushing into the intersection of energies. The power struggle above began to tip in favor of Zhang Yi and the others. Puff! The Undertaker suddenly vomited a mouthful of blood. He was bearing the brunt of the pressure from the 3 people in the front, and the golden-winged mutant could only assist him. But he didn't expect that the strength of the 3 people in front of him far exceeded his expectations. Zhang Yi understood in his heart that both the tall mutant and the golden-armored mutant were powerful enough to be ranked among the best in any country. These people were probably all here for the treasure of the Demon Kingdom. But where did they get the news? Zhang Yi's mind raced, and he thought of a possibility. The 4 great families claimed that the secret of the Demon Kingdom's treasure would not be passed on, so even Xingjing had not received any news. But if Su Pa Jigsaw asked Zhang Yi for help, was it permissible for other forces in the Snowy Plateau to seek help from outside? It's a mess, a complete mess. Zhang Yi didn't have the luxury of thinking about these things right now. The terrifying power within a radius of thousands of meters had turned into a viscous form, extremely unstable and ready to explode at any moment. After spitting out blood, the Undertaker's face turned pale for a moment, but soon the power transmitted from the 3,000 prayer wheels of Sangha Temple restored him to his former self. As the reincarnated Lord of the Corpse Forest, he had accumulated thousands of years of belief in the Tantric faith. He can no longer be called a human, and this body is merely a vessel for the Lord of the Corpse. As long as his faith endures, he will never perish. The violent power was about to get out of control. However, at this moment, the carved beasts on top of the huge doors of the Demon Kingdom all turned their eyes and looked over here. It was as if the ancient ancestors carved on the doors of the Demon Kingdom had all come back to life, bowing their heads and gazing at the people from thousands of years later. Suddenly, the Undertaker's face revealed an extremely strange smile. He formed a seal with his hands, and suddenly, the surging power seemed to have found an outlet and rushed towards the Undertaker. The terrifying power completely engulfed the Undertaker, who closed his eyes and smiled. The power penetrated his body and then crashed directly into the Demon Kingdom's doors. Zhang Yi's eyes coldly narrowed. No good, we've all been used by him. The golden-winged mutant had already retreated to the side and watched all this coldly. At this point, Zhang Yi and the others looked at each other. It was clear that this was all a trap set by the Undertaker. With the combined strength of all of them, they would open the doors to the Demon Kingdom together. Because with the strength of one person, it would be impossible to budge the doors of the Demon Kingdom. They were forced by the Undertaker to exert their full strength. Combining the power of the 5 top-level mutants, the huge doors did indeed move. The earth shook violently, and dust flew up. A low sound, as if from within the doors, seemed to come from within, as if a beast were growling. There's something in there. The tall mutant's expression also became serious, and he stopped smiling. The few people kept a safe enough distance, staring at the doors. However, the incredibly tall doors slowly began to bleed from the cracks. The thick, viscous blood slowly oozed out through the cracks in the doors, staining the sculptures and monsters of the ancient ancestors above, as if the ancient people of the Demon Kingdom had all resurrected. Zhang Yi felt a chill down his back. He could actually feel that everyone and every monster above were staring at him. The Undertaker coughed blood. The blow had shattered his body, but with the power of the tantric faith, his body quickly recovered as before. Even though his clothes were in tatters, his body remained flawless. He put his hands together in prayer, smiled, and bowed to the crowd. Thank you all for your help. There was no sign that the doors of the Demon Kingdom would open, but the blood had turned into a viscous river, flooding towards the crowd. The golden-winged mutant did not hesitate, flapping his wings and flying towards the well he had come in through. From within the doors came a strange, evil laugh, as if it were a ritual or the mad laughter of evil spirits. Zhang Yi was sweating coldly from the nape of his neck without realizing it. It was all so strange that the normally cautious Zhang Yi did not want to linger. Moreover, the departure of the golden-winged mutant and the gold-armored mutant meant that they could not stay any longer, so Zhang Yi directly opened the dimensional gate and quickly left the area. Zhang Yi did not go far. Before leaving, he secretly left a miniature camera inside to observe any changes in the area, just in case someone tried to steal the chicken. After him, the tall mutant and the gold-armored mutant hesitated for a moment, but they could sense the strangeness behind the doors and did not choose to continue the adventure. Their current identities and statuses are too lofty, and their top priority is definitely to protect their lives. In the end, only the Undertaker was left standing above the blood river. He looked back at the doors that were still gushing out thick streams of blood, let out a sigh, and clasped his hands together in prayer. The blood continued to flow, and the doors showed no signs of opening. The dirge behind him continued to sound. It didn't stop until the blood filled the entire valley and formed a huge pool. Everything slowly returned to peace, except for the huge Demon Kingdom doors, which had turned from their original dark green to a dark red. The Undertaker lowered his hands, turned away without another glance, and left. Just leave? Zhang Yi frowned, unable to help but feel suspicious. Wasn't he afraid that someone else would come after him? Or is it that even if someone sneaks in again, they won't be able to open the doors to the Demon Kingdom? Could the keys in the hands of the 4 great families be necessary to open the doors to the Demon Kingdom? Zhang Yi fell into a short period of contemplation.